Good evening and welcome to Mayor Cavalier Johnson's public hearing on the 2023 requested budget. The Mayor and the Budget Director, Nick Kovac, will be giving a brief overview and summary of the 2023 budget requests and related budget issues. And they're also joined tonight by Alderman Scott Spiker from the Common Council's Finance and Personnel Committee. Before they get started, I just wanted to review some of the basic functions in GoToWebinar. On the control panel on the left part of your screen, hopefully you see some icons. There is a microphone icon. After the presentation, there'll be a comment period. If you want to speak, what you'll need to do is when you're told to speak, you can unmute by selecting that microphone icon. And similarly, there should be a hand raise icon, and that'll proceed the same way. During the comment period, if you want to be recognized to speak, select that hand raise function, and then the staff will call on you when they can get to you. And the other thing we wanted to just bring up is that given the number of participants and attendees, and we want everybody to participate, we're going to limit comments to about 90 seconds to give everybody an opportunity to speak. If you don't want to speak, but you do have a comment or a question, there's a question function where you can type that in and then submit it. That'll go to the staff. And then again, during the comment period, we'll try to read those off for you to the extent that we can. So just some reminders, when you are not talking, make sure that you press that mute button. Otherwise, there could be some feedback. Also, speak slowly and clearly and respectfully. If you do want to speak, once we get to the comment period, use that raise your hand feature. And if you don't want to speak, but you still have a comment or question, you can type that in and submit it. And when you're called on, just remember to unmute yourself. And if you can, state your name and your address before you start speaking. And with that, I will turn it over to the mayor.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Eric. I appreciate that. And good afternoon, everybody who joined us. Thank you for joining for my first budget hearing. As a reminder, this is a presentation that will outline the 2023 requested budgets for city departments. It's an opportunity for you to learn about the city's financial situation and for you to provide me with feedback before we finalize my proposed executive budget, which will be presented next month. You're going to hear from my new budget director, Nick Kovac, and other members of his team. I also want to acknowledge that Alderman Scott Spiker, who serves as vice chair of the Finance and Personnel Committee on the Common Council, is joining us as well. So thank you for being here, Alderman. I also want to give a really big thank you to not just Director Kovac, but Molly King, my policy director, and all the exceptional members of the Budget Office for all their hard work in preparing the presentation night. So the slide that you see before you talks about some of the goals of this presentation. And those goals are these: to make sure you have background on Milwaukee's finances, give you information about the budget process, and an overview of what departments have requested for their 2023 budgets. You go to the next slide, please. Before we get started, just wanted to take the time to give some facts to folks who may be joining us for the first time. The city of Milwaukee has an annual budget process, unlike some other units of government. State government and federal government go off a fiscal budget year. Some starting in July, others September, October. In the city of Milwaukee, we go from January 1st until December 31st of every year in an annual budget format. The city budget is required by state law to be balanced. So that means that our expenditures cannot exceed our revenues. The city of Milwaukee was also founded in 1846. That's 2 years before the state of Wisconsin was founded and admitted into the Union. And Milwaukee City Hall that you see on the slide there was once upon a time the tallest building in the world from 1895 for 4 years right after its construction. Go to the next slide. So this slide will show you that in Milwaukee, and not just in Milwaukee, I should add, that in communities across the entire state, we've got a unsustainable fiscal model. The slide shows that the city has been forced to increase its property tax levy to maintain current services because state shared revenue from state government has been decreasing for decades. The sales and the income tax revenue is generated in the city is collected by the state, and the shared revenue program is supposed to return some of those tax revenues back to the city to support local services here on the ground. The state, however, has decreased state shared revenue despite increases in their sales and income tax revenue, both statewide and from right here in the city of Milwaukee. This has forced the city to increase its tax levy essentially to the maximum allowable amount under levy limits in order to preserve our core government services. Our ability to capture property taxes is also capped by state law. Going to the next slide. This slide shows some of the decreases in shared revenue that have made it difficult for us to maintain public safety services. In the year 2000, so on the left part of the slide there, you'll see that shared revenue was able to fund the entirety of the police department budget, our largest budget expenditure. It was able to fund as well the entirety of the fire department, and it also left some money left over for us to make investments in their city departments, other core services, or other priorities for the city. In 2022, you fast forward to today, shared revenue only funds 78% of the police department budget. No shared revenue was available for the fire department, nor any other city department, nor any other priorities that the city may have liked to invest in. So in order to maintain city services to the maximum extent possible, the city has been forced to increase the tax levy, which again is capped by state law. Let me go to the next slide for me. So this slide shows that there's a lack of growth in state aid that's combined with increasing service costs and our desire to maintain services as much as possible, which results in a structural budget problem that we're experiencing. Expenses are growing faster than our revenues, and without a large increase in revenue and or additional tools to generate new revenue, the city's got no choice other than to cut services in order to balance the budget. The city's been taking action to reduce costs and increase our revenues, though. The slide lists a few examples that we've undertaken over the past few years. Those examples are the elimination of fire engines. We've eliminated 7 of those since 2017. We've increased employee health care contributions. We've increased existing user fees and created a new user fee as well. And over time, there's been periodic salary as well as hiring freezes, along with furloughs too, in order to tighten our belts and take actions to reduce costs. However, the city's capacity to do this is exceeded by the growing structural budget deficit, which is $151 million for 2023. For reference, over the past 18 years, those are budgets from 2005 up until 2022, the average starting budget deficit was approximately $46 million. So let me go back, 2005, $46 million as a starting budget deficit to $151 million here in 2022. The primary factors driving the much larger budget deficit in 2023 are a large estimated increase in the city's pension contribution and the compounding impact of decreases in state aids that we talked about just a little bit ago. On to the next slide. From the city's perspective, the state has the means to increase state aid to assist all local governments, not just here in Milwaukee. Again, all local governments across the state are suffering because of the lack of revenue that's being shared from state government back at the local level. This slide shows the increase in the state general purpose revenue. Essentially, it's operating revenue since 2003. Now, as you can see, there's a significant increase in the state's revenue. Over the same period, the state's provision of aid to Milwaukee through the state shared revenue program and the ERP program, also known as the expenditure restraint program, has significantly decreased. This is an issue for all local governments. I want to stress that it's not just a Milwaukee issue, it's all over the state. As a matter of fact, I remember just last year, there was an op-ed that was written by the mayors of Madison as well as Brookfield. And, to me, if the state funding formula for local government doesn't work for a community as wealthy as Brookfield, one of the wealthiest in the entire state of Wisconsin, then it just simply doesn't work, especially when you think about how it impacts a community like Milwaukee that's got many, entrenched, difficulties and challenges, problems that we've been working to deal with over the last several decades. Go to the next slide. All right. The reduction in shared revenue has a significant impact on the city because of the compounding impact of cost increases over the decades. So in 2000, the combined shared revenue and ERP expenditure restraint program payment to the city was $244.9 million. If this amount were to have increased by the rate of inflation, which is a general measure of the increase in cost to provide city services, it would have equaled $385 million in 2022. The actual payment that the city received in 2022 was about $230 million. So in real dollars, that is dollars that are adjusted for the impact of inflation, reflecting increased costs, the city is receiving about $156 million less in state aid this year than we did in 2000. And this has largely been the case ever since then. This amount is about equal to the structural budget deficit that we're facing in 2023, about $156 million. In other words, if the state had increased shared revenue and ERP payments to the city by the rate of inflation, the city would be able to balance its 2023 budget without making service cuts and without using any ARPA or American Rescue Plan Act funds. Go on to the next slide for me. So we already discussed some of the budget cuts the city has made to reduce costs in the prior slide. What this slide shows is that the city has reduced its costs to less than the rate of inflation. In 2000, the city's general purpose budget was about $450 million. If the city had simply increased its budget by the rate of inflation, again, a general measure of the increase in costs, the budget would have been about $710 million in 2021. The city's actual 2021 budget was $639 million, or about $70 million less than inflationary growth. So essentially what this shows is that the city has controlled growth in costs. We've been cutting things. We've been making changes. We've been belt tightening in order to make sure that we're able to provide services. Go on to the next slide for me. Speaking of belt tightening, this slide goes over some of the actions that the city has taken in order to do that belt tightening measure. Some of the actions that we've done over the years include elimination of over 1,000 full-time positions at the city. We've eliminated salary steps for general city employees. Now, salary steps, they are guaranteed automatic pay increases on an annual basis. They were eliminated for general city employees back in 2011. But as we talk about employees, police and fire employees, they still receive annual step increases in addition to an annual cost of living increase, and they receive that through collective bargaining. The city is required under state law to reach these agreements with the fire union as well as the police union on salary increases, which in practical terms means that the city has extremely limited ability to control the growth in the police and the fire salaries. The city now requires employees to contribute more to their pension as well as their health care as well. I'm going to go on to the next slide. Now, here are some key considerations for the 2023 budget, some of my goals and priorities and the challenges as we formulate my 2023 executive budget. And I welcome engagement from the community, from the county council as we go through this process as well. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to the City of Milwaukee's new budget director, Nick Kovac.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for that presentation, giving everyone some background on our fiscal challenges. Thank you to the many residents that are here. Over 100 of you are here, and I think over 300 of you had registered. And of course, thank you to my entire budget team for helping us put together these slides and helping us do the work that we're about to describe. I'll start describing to you what stage of the process we're at now. We are currently reviewing the requested budget. So as the mayor mentioned, we are on an annual budget process. So every budget year begins in January. From January to May, the departments begin to gather up their requests, figure out what it would cost them to continue their current services. That is usually what we ask them to do, to have a requested budget that would continue current services. Now that request is usually not granted given all the fiscal constraints that the mayor has described, and it's going to become increasingly hard for us to continue even asking for costs to continue requests given our fiscal challenges. But on May 10th, we did get those departmental budget requests, and the purpose of this meeting is to show the detail in those requests, to give it's already been published in the Journal Sentinel a few months ago, but to give the public an idea of what's in those requests from May to September. We're currently in August. The mayor and my team and the departments and the public review those requests in order to put together a proposed budget by September 20th. Then, then throughout October, Vice Chair of the Finance Committee, Scott Spiker, and Chair of that committee, Marina Dimitrievich, and their team, as well as a lot of the other members of the Common Council, will attend those hearings throughout October, and the public is welcome to attend those hearings as well. We'll review department by department every detail in the mayor's proposed budget. That will happen in October. On October 3rd will be your chance, similar to tonight, to weigh in with the elected officials and the decision makers present to give your thoughts on the mayor's proposed budget, which you'll have in your hands next month. And then in November, the Common Council will vote on that budget. And then if there's any mayoral vetoes, the council will override or sustain those vetoes, and we'll have a budget by the middle of November at the latest to begin the budget again next January, where the whole process starts over again. So before I get into the detailed summaries of the requests, just a general description of where our money comes from. Our general fund revenues used to be, the shared revenue used to be the biggest part, as the charts the mayor showed you describe, but shared revenue is now only about a quarter of our budgets from the state. That's the sales and income taxes we already pay, and we're just getting less and less of it back from the state government. Property taxes have become a bigger percentage for all the reasons the mayor described. It's now more than a third of our budget comes from the property tax. About 1/5 of our budget comes from charges for services. There's a variety of fees that go into those charges for services. And then there's a number of other small sources of revenue. Where does the money go? These are the departmental budgets, the departmental general cities purposes budgets, not counting enterprise funds like water and sewers. And so you can see that the public safety is more than half our budget and always has been historically. The police department is 44% of our budget. Fire department is 18%. And public works, which does streets, sidewalks, picks up garbage, plows the snow, handles the trees, fills potholes, 19% of our budget. The library is 4% of our budget. The Department of Neighborhood Services, which issues construction permits and also issues fines and orders if properties are not up to code, is 3% of our budget. The health department is 2%, and administrative departments are just 2% of our budget. So that gives you an idea of where the money comes from and where it goes. Understanding the overall structure of our budget, counting everything. If you looked at the requests that came in on May 10th, they totaled $1.88 billion. Obviously, the mayor outlined that there's a $150 million gap there. So this is not going to be what the budget is, but this is what the requests came in. And $1.45 billion of that is in what we call the property tax supplemented funds. That's general city purposes. That would be all the departments that I described on the pie chart before, as well as special purpose accounts, the employee retirement system, both the funding we need to do to fund the normal costs and the future liabilities to pay benefits, as well as the administrative costs of the pension system, capital improvements, the amount of money we allocate to spend in capital improvements separated from operating budgets, and then of course the city debt, which is how we fund those capital improvements through general obligation borrowing and the contingent fund. That's the bulk of the budget. That's $1.45 billion of it. The remainder is in special revenue funds like the waterworks, sewer maintenance, transportation. Grant and aids funds are budgeted separately, although they're embedded in most of the other departments. And the county delinquent tax fund is a manner in which we cooperate with the county when we have to recover taxes on properties. So as we start to look at in broad strokes, where again, we're speaking about the requests in the 2023 budget, where that money went 40% of it would go to departmental expenses, a little more than $500,000 if all of the requests were granted. A little less than that would go into capital improvements and city debt. And both of those are, you can see there's big changes from the prior year. And both of those reflect that there are needs on the operating and capital side that in order to, in the capital side, actually stop deferring maintenance and fully fund all of the repairs and new equipment and building repairs we need to do would be a considerable expense. And on the operating side, to truly cost to continue the budget Now, some of that this year, that the departmental expenses looks a little high, the 25.6, partly because of ARPA. ARPA has kind of changed. It makes it hard to compare year to year a little bit. So it's a little bit artificially high because we asked departments not to assume they'd be getting ARPA again this year because we weren't sure exactly where the ARPA would go. We know there will be some ARPA, not enough to fill the whole gap, but all the departments submitted cost to continue budgets that did not include the assumption of ARPA funding. And then you can also see that healthcare, employee retirement, which went up considerably because we expect our pension obligations to increase next year and in the next 5 year stable funding window, as well as special purposes accounts and the contingent fund, which did not change much. If you go into what the revenue estimates would be, this number in the top left, the property tax levy, that is very high, and that is essentially an imaginary number. But this is just how we sort of, when we first get in the requests, we say, well, let's just assume we grant all the requests. This is what the tax levy would have to be to fund all the requests. That would be an increase of 51%. It would be a $157 million increase in the property tax in the city of Milwaukee. That is that the state would not allow us to do that. There are levy limits, as the mayor described. I also am guessing that if I propose this to the mayor, he would say we're not doing that. But it's the only way we can sort of describe how we would, before we make the cuts to the request. This just describes the possible ways revenue could cover those requests. So you can see here what the shared revenue and all combined with other intergovernmental revenue would be, as well as the current fees that if we continue the fees at their current rates, as well as other sources of revenue, which we had described earlier. So when you look at that, again, that hypothetical amount of taxes that we don't expect to have, where that would get distributed if all the requests that are currently in front of us were granted, the bulk of that would go for general city purposes. Another huge chunk would go to the pension system, employee retirements, as well as capital improvements and the contingent fund. So, and you can also see where talking about some of the enterprise funds and the special revenue funds, the waterworks, sewer maintenance, transportation funds. You can see there's some changes, but not huge changes in those funds requests. It looks like we're zeroing out all the bids, but this is actually just an accounting change that was recommended by the comptroller. The bids are sort of an extra taxing district in certain geographic areas. And so we're just going to account for those differently. So we're not actually zeroing out those funds. We're just counting them in a different way than we did before. You can also see how much the grant and aid money has moved, and that's really a reflection too of how ARPA was budgeted. It's a matter of when we got the various tranches of ARPA in. So the grant and aid numbers are very hard to compare year to year in these last couple of years because of the American Rescue Plan Act. So as we get into the details of which department asked for how much, this is probably will be of most interest to a lot of the residents. All of the numbers you see on the left-hand side, the requests, do not include fringe benefits. So for those of you that follow the budget closely, in most of our documents, we do show all of these departments fully fringed up, whole cost, and that is the most responsible way to describe it. But when we get in the initial request, we don't initially count the fringes. So the police department's listed at 212 here. Their actual cost was with fringes, both current and requested, would be over $300 million. And you can go down the line there looking at public works, at fire, at the new emergency communications department, which is the new 911 center we're creating under civilian control now, the library, health, neighborhood services, and various administrative departments. If you look on the right-hand column, you can see that this is the amount of money these departments got at ARPA last year. So if you're trying, and that will guide you, I think, as you try to do an apples to apples comparison in your own head of how much did these departmental requests really increase as part of their cost to continue requests. So for instance, if you look at fire, you see, there's an increase of $42 million, which seems like an awful lot. It's almost half their budget. But in fact, 28 of that $42 million was money they got from ARPA last year that they weren't allowed to count again this year, although we'll see what we end up putting in the proposed budget. So if you want to do an apples to apples comparison, you really need to deduct this ARPA replacement from this change amount. And that'll give you a sense both of the relative size and the dollar amounts of each department and what they're requesting in order to continue the services that you expect as a resident from those departments. Overall, if we tried to summarize some of the big increases, if you look at all the requests, there's an increase in the debt service tax levy. Some of that has to do with the way some of our reserve funds are shifting around and can't assist us as much. A lot of it has to do with the fact that the requests for capital were actually more than double what we can likely afford to borrow to pay. So that just indicates In the case of operating, we ask departments to only put in the cost to continue. So even if there's new services they want to provide, they're really not supposed to request them. In the case of capital, you're really maintaining existing major city infrastructure that you have. So we tell everybody, just tell us all of your needs, and then we'll figure out what we can afford and we'll prioritize them. But those also came in extremely high this year, 221 million, which would be more than double what we likely can afford to borrow. So there'll be a lot of things that we probably should repair that we're not going to be able to afford this year. The mayor's going to have to make some very tough decisions along with the council and all of you to determine those priorities. The pension contribution, there may be questions about this. There's a lot of complexity here, but long story short, we're nearing the end of a 5-year stable contribution window where we were putting in about $71 million a year to pay our normal costs and our unfunded liabilities. It's a very ballpark estimate that we had back in May is that would increase by about 50 million. We won't actually know that number until early next year. So we are swimming in the dark a little bit in terms of trying to know exactly what that new number will be for the next 5 years. But we put it in the request that we would try to fund the pension at the new level that we're expecting, and we'll see. That will be it. That's a big, as the mayor mentioned, that was one of his key considerations for the budget, was trying to create some long-term stability for the pension while still maintaining all of the other services that the city provides. And then healthcare did go up by 5 million, which partially drove us. And so this is my contact information. If there's questions that occur to you later, or if you're watching this repeat, you can contact me anytime, either by phone or by email, to ask detailed questions. And we'd like to leave as much time as we can now for residents to give us comments. For the first comment, I think we'd like to hear from the Vice Chair of the Finance Personnel Committee, Alderman Scott Spike.
Thank you, Director Kovac. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we have a relatively new mayor and a relatively new budget director, but as anyone who follows city government knows, these are old hands at looking at the budget. Mayor Johnson, before he was mayor, of course, was President Johnson of the council, and Alderman Kovac. Budget Director Kovac was Alderman Kovac and served as chair of the Finance and Personnel Committee. So we have good hands at the wheel here. Looking forward to cooperation and working with the council, including the chair of my committee, Alderwoman Dimitrievich, President Perez, and the rest of the council, as well as myself. Just very briefly, because I want to get to the public comments, as was pointed out, we have a structural imbalance that's getting larger. This means that we very basically, we can't do what we wish to do under the current revenue structure.
I didn't want it like duplicating the sound.
So what that means is that we have a number of tough choices to make this year and especially moving forward. At this point, public input is critical. If you can't do everything you wish to do, you have to make tough choices, which relies on input from the public about what they regard as essential. What do you expect from your city government? What do you demand? What do you require from your city government? So that's why public sessions such as this one are important. So with that, again, I'd like to thank the administration for the partnership and look forward to hearing the public's comments. Thank you.
Okay, at this point, we'll open it up for public comment. So as a reminder, there's sort of 2 steps to this process. I'll call out who is the next speaker, and I'll unmute you, and then you must also unmute yourself. And then you'll have 90 seconds to make your statement, and then I'll give you a 15-second warning when we get close to the end of that 90 seconds. So first up is going to be Omar Flores. So Omar, I am going to unmute you. And Omar, the floor is yours. Omar, unmute your microphone. Okay, we'll come back to Omar. We'll switch it over. Diego Garcia. Diego, I'm going to unmute you, and the floor is now yours. Go ahead, Diego.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, hi. My name is Diego Garcia. I'm with the Milwaukee Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression. I'm also a proud union member of Local 550. I want to comment, that this meeting is truly not accessible. Okay, and I also work in tech, so I think even doing Teams would have been a better solution than this. Second of all, I just want to let you know that the demands for the Milwaukee Alliance, for the city budget, is that, no public sector jobs, should be cut, and honoring races that were promised to city workers, that the city should also fund public sector jobs to retain and hire more workers, because I see that a lot, where city workers are leaving for private contractors. And also to divert, money from this proposed budget, to go to non-law enforcement public sector jobs such as public works that got measly 19%, and, to culture, recreation, mental health services. No further funding to the police that will buy militarized equipment. And also, if there's a settlement, a civil suit, with the police, it should be taken off their operating budget rather than, rather than the whole city's budget. So that's all I had to say. And I hope that, the next meeting is more accessible than this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Diego. Next up, let's try to go back to Omar Flores. Omar, I'm going to unmute you, and you should be unmuted. So unmute yourself, and the floor is yours.
Hi there. Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Fantastic. My name is Omar Flores. I'm a co-chair with the Milwaukee Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression. And so I'm just going to let you know of some of the demands that the community we work with have. So primarily folks on the south and the north sides of the city who have been most impacted by police misconduct as well as violent crime. In our time canvassing with the community, it really seems that the answer is unanimous, that people don't want more funding for the police. They want more funding for things that will increase their livelihood in the community. The police have a homicide clearance rate of 55% so far, meaning they only solved 55% of murder cases this year. And I already know the narrative that we're going to get from the Milwaukee Police Association is that they're understaffed. And I want to let you know why that's not the case. Because whenever we host a peaceful protest or even just a social event in a park, they show up in numbers. I remember when Ron Johnson came to Milwaukee, there were around a dozen officers standing around doing nothing in response to the 5 of us that were protesting his visit to Milwaukee. There are several violent crimes happening in Milwaukee while they waste our time and our money with basically standing around and doing nothing. And so we want more than input. I know Spiker was kind of talking about how, it's important to have community input. Otherwise, we're kind of going about things blind. It needs to be more than that. It needs to actually be reflected into the budget. I know this isn't the first year that you guys have heard that we should really be taking funds out of the police and putting them into things that increase recreation, increase the life and livelihood of what's happening in Milwaukee. Again,
15 seconds, Omar.
Yep, we're talking with some of the most highly impacted communities by crime, and they are not saying to fund the police more. They have not been doing their job. 55% does not show that they are doing their job. We need to put the money towards something else. You are driving our city into insolvency. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Omar. Next up, we have Michelle Bryant, and then after Michelle is going to be Tristan Harper King. So Michelle, I'm going to unmute you now, and the floor is yours. Go ahead, Michelle. Okay, we'll come back to Michelle. Next up is Tristan Harper King. Tristan, you are unmuted. Take it away.
Hi. I did phone in as Tristan Harper King, but my name is Alexandria. I am a organizer in the city of Milwaukee. I've been here my entire life. I've had the pleasure of working with multiple organizations, more specifically African American Roundtable more recently. I was in a hearing prior to this. As I am listening in on this hearing, more specifically, I just want to say that this seems like a lot of wasted time. There's not much that people almost twice my age at this point, or triple, are actively doing to change the circumstances within this city. It's just a lot of us dressing up and falling under the respectability politics of what a meeting looks like on webcam, making any kind of change whatsoever. So I just, my encouragement to things like this would be, instead of us making things sound good, showing off our credentials, academia, us actually making a change within the city of Milwaukee, or the city is going to continue to fall under. Again, as someone mentioned earlier, there is no real change here. Police are not doing much of anything, and as well as the elected officials, we all dress up suit and tie and nothing changes. With that being said, again, I just want to end off by saying that these kinds of meetings actually change nothing, because there's no real work done. There's the bare minimum. We have more than enough money to put money where it truly belongs, and it's not happening. So we need to actually start to strategize a little bit better, rather than using words that sound good and actually making a change. That's all.
Thank you. Let's try to go back to Michelle Bryant. Michelle, I see two of you up here. I'll try and unmute one of them, and try and unmute yourself, Michelle. Okay, I'll try the other Michelle Bryant. Okay, Michelle, you're unmuted.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right, great. And thank you so much for the additional labor to get me on. I have a couple of quick questions, and I'm also listening in for State Senator Lena Taylor. One, could you give information? We heard from a listener about the police budget, and I don't know that the community appreciates what's the fixed cost of that budget versus the operational dollars when we talk about the need to remove dollars from the police department. So what, I know for pension purposes, but I don't know that the community knows. So that's number one. Senator Taylor also was concerned about the fact that we will have 3 vacancies in terms of automatic representation and how that impacts this process, if at all. And so if you could speak to those 2 things, that would be helpful.
Michelle, for the police budget, we can get you a detailed breakdown. I can tell you that most of the police budget, like most of every budget, departmental budget, is personnel. And then obviously you have to include fringe health and pension costs in that. So, but there is also operating costs that are significant too in the police department. And we can get you a breakdown in dollars and percentages of those different costs. And I'll let Vice Chair Spiker speak, or go if you want to speak to the council process, but there will be, there are some vacancies now that will get filled, as some in November and some after November.
So there's 2 vacancies that are going to be filled in November. Mayor Johnson's district and Director Kovac's districts, the 2nd and the 3rd. Those elections will be held in November. And then we will have 2 more vacancies. We do have 2 more vacancies with Alderwoman Lewis's district, the 9th, and soon to be Director of OVP, current Alderman Hamilton's district, the 1st. So we'll have 4 gone for the budget session, putting us down to 11.
If I can add in just quickly, because I think Michelle asked more pointedly how it affects this process. So sure, there's a reduction in the number of members who would deliberate on and vote on the budget one way or the other. But my understanding, and perhaps Alderman Spiker can correct me if I'm wrong, or maybe Director Kovac, it still would require a simple majority of the council to approve the budget. Or to reject it, for that matter. Is that correct?
Okay. That's my understanding, yes.
Okay, we'll take 2 more speakers, and then we'll go to Eric Pearson for some of the written questions. So first on deck is Miranda Bratz, to be followed by Robert Penner. So Miranda, I am unmuting you, and you can go ahead and unmute yourself and take it away.
Hi, thank you. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Budget Director Kovac. I am a local business owner. I'm also a former city manager, and I'm an urban economic development expert. And one thing that I wanted to keenly point out that can help with your budget problems is increasing the population of your city and increasing revenue through equitable economic development. I think right now, as somebody who is active as a developer in a city, one of the reasons why we're unable to accomplish projects that increase population and drive revenue are because of the hurdles we have to jump through. So I highly recommend that you look at a keen, equitable economic development strategy. I also would ask the question and set aside a line item for the RNC that's coming in 2024. I think the question you need to ask is that $200 million that's going to be sent into the economy. Are your business owners going to remain open, and are employees going to show up? You're going to maximize your police overtime line item, and you're going to maximize your public works overtime line item preparing for the RNC, even if there's reimbursement, even if there's grants, and even if there's National Guard. And where is that $200 million being spent? That's going to be spent in the downtown, high-income census tract areas. It's an inequitable budget item for 2024, and I really hope that we prepare for that. I'd also like to encourage a community policing strategy where I think 55 to 70% of an annual municipal budget is usually spent on policing. So I don't think that we're overboard in terms of where the city lays, but I do think that community policing in terms of intervention crisis can also help. Those are my comments.
Thank you. We're getting some comments that some people are feeling that their hands are being unraised. The only time I'm putting a hand down is after you've asked a question, but and just make sure that if you do raise your hand that you keep it up. So next up is Robert Penner. Robert, you are unmuted. Go ahead and unmute yourself, and the floor is yours.
Hi there. Thank you very much. My name is Robert Penner from the Party for Socialism and Liberation. And I really do appreciate how Alderman Spiker was saying that we need the public's input. That's excellent. I totally agree with that. And luckily for you all, the PSL actually did a project earlier this year asking people what the biggest needs are here in the city of Milwaukee. And we interviewed 231 people all across the city. And I want to speak specifically to the responses that we got related to the police, because I'm seeing 44% of the police budget or of the budget going to the police. Let's see if that is what the people are actually asking for. So to our survey, 72% of respondents indicated they were concerned about police shootings and killings of civilians. 76 indicated concern about racial profiling by the police. 75 indicated concern about over-policing of nonviolent offenses. 74% about police conduct. 73% about police criminalization of homeless people, and another 70% saying that the police abuse their power. 73% saying that they would not support increases in the police budget. So what we're kind of getting then from what was a very thorough survey is the idea that the increase in the police budget is extremely high. And I mean, this is a strong indicator of what the population feels. I know Mayor Johnson has received a copy of this because I brought one to his house myself. So I know he's at least had this report brought to him. So I hope you take that into account and consider shaving significantly off the police budget, because it is bloated, it is far too high, especially for a department that does not solve crime. It merely reacts to crime. It does not solve anything. We have to start funding.
15 seconds.
We have to start funding things that will actually prevent crime at the social source, like maybe removing all of the lead pipes and lead paint in the city that are poisoning people and causing neurological impairments on a pace that's faster than 100 years. Thanks.
Thank you, Robert. So at this point, we're going to take it over to Eric Pearson, who's been monitoring the comments and statements and questions that have been submitted via the question feature, and then we'll go back to the speakers. So Eric, take it away.
All right, hopefully everybody could hear me. We do have several questions. I'll try to get to as many of those as we can, but as Bill said, we'll be alternating back and forth between the spoken questions and the ones people submit. So we do have a question about why the police budget is so high and why the crime rate then continues to be so high. I think the question is, if we're providing all this money to the police department, why are we not seeing much change in terms of crime? So that's the first question.
I can say that kind of data analysis or evaluating whether departments are effectively meeting their goals is part of what we do both during this May to September process and even more actively outside the intensity of the budget process. We have regular meetings the mayor does with all departments, accountability and management, where we look at the goals of the department. And obviously one of the goals of the police department is reduction in crime. It's also one of the goals of the Office of Violence Prevention. So we have existing metrics that we use to hold them accountable and ask them how their strategies are changing and what they're doing. And we'll be developing new metrics, and this will obviously be a focus of our analysis because it's a huge public priority and it's a huge public investment, and we do want to make sure that it's as effective as possible, and that's part of our review. It's not, we're not just the budget office, we're the budget and management office, and we do make an attempt to manage all the departments. Thank you for the question.
Okay, and then before I get to the next one, there were people asking about whether the presentation will be available. I believe it will be. A link might be emailed out to people. I think that will be distributed or communicated as far as the link of getting this presentation. And I think it's also going to be rebroadcast on Channel 25. But there's another couple questions dealing with the police department. One is, have the police ever seen a hiring or a salary freeze? And then just asking in general, how much control the city has in the police budget and to what extent they control their own budget.
Well, as I mentioned in my part of the presentation, the city of Milwaukee and local governments across the state really are extremely limited in our ability to create freezes in salaries for police and fire. Those unions, the police union, the fire union, continue to have the ability to be able to bargain for wages and benefits and the like. And that came after Wisconsin Act 10 back in 2011, which stripped that right from municipal employees, but left it in place for members of the police and fire profession. So, so we don't have the ability to fight that every single time. We've got to turn around and negotiate with the police and fire unions because that's the state law.
Yeah, and that's the answer on the salary freeze. As far as the hiring freeze, there definitely has been, we hire police and fire in classes, and there definitely have been significant reductions in personnel over the last several years in response to our budget, structural budget deficits.
And the next question deals with the American Rescue Plan Act. The question is, how much total federal funding did we get through the American Rescue Plan Act? And what percent is being used to essentially balance the budget?
The total was nearly $400 million. And there is a report online, and Andrea Fowler, who's our ARPA director, I believe, is a panelist. Andrea, are you available to address the questions about the current percentages that are going to the city budget?
I am. Let me see if I can get my camera to turn on here. In response to your question, though, while I'm working on the tech, we do have approximately $400 million, as Director Kovac mentioned. That is coming in 2 tranches, and a significant portion of it, of the first tranche, was dedicated to maintaining current city services. So that was approximately, I would say, about 1/3. I'm using very, very round numbers there. We haven't determined how much of the second tranche, that second half of the funding, will be used to continue to fund existing city services, but that is something that the American Rescue Plan Act Task Force, which will be meeting soon, will be considering and will be accepting, I believe, input from the public. Thank you for the question.
And the next question might be a little more technical. It's asking about about the bond rating the city gets, whether that has changed and what it currently is.
We are on a negative outlook from a couple of the bond agencies. They're asking, and part of what they're asking us for is to give them a plan on how they're aware of our structural issues too. They look closely at our use of reserve funds, and they look closely at our overall future obligations and our future revenues. So they're aware that our future obligations, cost to continue services and pension obligations, are higher than our anticipated revenue. And they'd like to see a plan on how to do that so we don't get downgraded even further. We actually have a call with those rating agencies in the morning. We'll begin to discuss some of our strategies.
And that's a big concern for me as well. And we've talked about it a lot during these budget deliberations. That's part of the reason why I've been working so tirelessly in order to find ways to generate additional revenues for the city of Milwaukee, working with our partners at state government that hold the levers to make sure that we can actually realize the ability to raise additional revenues so that we can circumvent some of the changes or the challenges rather that we have in terms of our outlook from the bonding agencies. And that's important because the more that we end up paying on debt, that's less money that we have to pay on services or other priorities for the city.
Okay, I'll go through a couple more questions and then turn it back to Bill so he can call on some attendees who want to speak. But one question is an interesting one. It's about what are your thoughts on issuing referendum elections via mobile app to widen the accessibility of involvement for citizens? So I think they're asking generally a mobile app might be useful with some low voter turnout in impoverished areas, but just in general, probably just using mobile apps for either elections or referendum or just communicating issues with the public.
That's an interesting concept. Some information sharing certainly, I think, could be useful or possible. That, however, in terms of elections, we would have to consult with the Election Commission and probably more importantly with legislators in Madison about the structure of elections. We don't get to write all the rules on that. Some of that we have to abide by state law. So that'd be a question that we'd have to take up offline and explore that in that way.
Okay, and the last question before I turn it back to Bill is someone was asking, it was their understanding that the Finance Committee recently approved a 10% increase for many of the top paying management positions as well as for common council members. And they just want to know, is that accurate? And then also, why have general city employees not being given equivalent raises?
Yeah, they haven't voted yet. There is a proposal that they may consider at the next cycle to eliminate the mayor's cap and there may be certain positions. I don't think we've put a number on it. It'll be up to DER. There may be certain positions that get reclassified, and we've been reclassifying not just top level positions, but in response to the sort of the crisis created very directly by Act 10, where we're basically told the only way to balance your budget is to stop giving your employees raises. And so we pretty much did that for about a decade. Hardly anybody other than police and fire who could still bargain got a raise. That's created a real crisis and created huge vacancies in many of our positions. So we've been aggressively reclassifying a lot of different positions. That does come with a cost, but the cost of not doing it is to lose workers and not be able to deliver the services that you have. As far as what was the other part? So, but there's not a percentage yet on those other issues. But that is an issue before the Finance Committee, likely in September.
And I'd just like to touch base again on what Director Kovac just mentioned, because it's a fine point and I think a point that needs to be made. Because the city has not been offering those raises over the course of the last decade. We're hemorrhaging employees, essentially. They're going to other units of government. They're taking the time to come here, to be hired here, to get some initial training here. And the training and expertise that our employees have working in the city of Milwaukee is, pretty much the gold standard, allows them to go to any other local unit of government. But it costs, money to train those folks. And so if we train them and then they leave, then we've lost out on that investment. So it's important to make sure that we offer competitive wages so that we can compete with the surrounding municipalities and retain that talent for the city of Milwaukee, so that we don't lose out on that. It's one of those things now at this point, more than a decade later, where you kind of can't afford to do it, but you also can't afford not to do it as well. And that's the sort of position that we're in right now because of the strain that we've had on revenue generation at the city.
Okay, and I'll turn it over to Bill then to call on some of the attendees who have questions.
Okay, thanks, Eric. First up on the speakers list, we've got Alex Larson, to be followed by Aurelia Ceja. So Alex, I'm going to unmute you now and unmute yourself and take it away.
Good evening. This gets said all too often, but a budget is a reflection of a city's priorities. This budget is set to yet again give our police department over $300 million. But what is this money getting us as taxpayers? We've heard a lot recently about some older people wanting to see metrics and data coming from the Office of Violence Prevention, but why are the police not held to that same standard? OVP has a staff of 15 in this budget. Meanwhile, MPD staffing levels are 100 times greater than that, and our homicide rate is set to break last year's record. Now, with regards to our other big public safety problem of auto thefts and reckless driving, we first learned about this in November of 2020, yet the data that almost half of these thefts came from kids under the age of 16 was not revealed to the public by the police department until December of 2021. Why did it take over a year to release that data and those metrics? Because we all know that more policing is not the answer to redirect this energy coming from some of our youth. So why are we continuing to call for more police funding as the problems that they claim to be the solutions to grow worse and worse? In addition to this, there's been a lot of talk about the financial stress that our city is under, but we refuse to do anything meaningful about it because we keep sinking large sums of money into the police and their associated pension costs. Even with the plan coming from the former mayor's pension task force to use the majority of that second tranche of ARPA funds to shift this problem back a year or two, it's still not enough.
15 seconds, Alex.
So we've received this once-in-a-generation federal money and we're setting ourselves up to squander it away. For these reasons, I echo the call for a participatory budgeting process. It is very clear that our community needs a larger say in how our tax dollars are being utilized. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next up, we've got Aurelia Ceja, followed by Maya Neal. Aurelia, you are unmuted. Go ahead and unmute yourself, and the floor is yours.
Hi, my name is Aurelia Ceja, and I'm a Silver City resident. I can't comprehend how the budget of the police takes up 44% of the total budget when the police certainly are not 44% of Milwaukee's population. It's disgusting that all city departments have seen salary and hiring freezes while the police have run wild with their budget every single year. We desperately need more city workers to have safer roads and communities, not more cops for these things. And we need to be honoring salary raises promised for essential city workers, raises that they very much deserve. I'm here as a member of the public and a member of Milwaukee Alliance Against Racism and Political Repression, saying that the police budget increase is non-essential and demanding to see it cut by 50% this next year. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we've got Maya Neal. Maya, take it away.
Hello, good evening. My name is Maya. I am a resident of the 15th District. I joined today just to address a few things that I've learned and seen. First, I feel like getting participation from our community is really important to this process, but what I've, experienced as a member of the community hasn't really seemed sufficient to me. All of the educational events I saw were virtual, and I only saw them because organizations posted them on their social media. It didn't come to me in the mail. It didn't come to me on a sign in my community. So I found that to be quite lacking. It shouldn't be up to organizations like ART or the other groups that have spoken on here and done advocacy in our community to be at the grocery store, at the festivals, in our communities, sending us mail, letting us know about this process. So that's a little disappointing to me. But specifically in regards to the budget, I see a lot of underfunded things in our community, and I feel like ever since I started paying attention to the budget, it's, been a problem. So specifically looking at health and public health and how we're approaching that, as well as violence prevention. I think also support for our, low-income folks, our folks living in poverty in the city is not very good. And I think, specifically housing support is where I, kind of see an opportunity for us to truly support our residents. I also think something I specifically want to acknowledge and note is that there's not a lot serving young people in this city and in this city's budget. And that's extremely disappointing to me, seeing as, how often young people are the scapegoat for y'all as leaders and how often you point to young people as problems and not, as the wonderful, minds and opportunities that they are in our communities. So I'd like to see more, opportunities, spaces, grants, whatever, that are pouring into our young people and helping, to develop them into the community we want them to be in the future. And lastly, I'll end, just by saying that I think the biggest problem that almost everybody on this call has repeated is that our police budget is way too high. So often they're not doing, much to, add to our community. I feel like more often my experiences with the police have been negative and have made me disappointed that we're spending this much money on them. I, ideally would like us to, be working towards a future where we don't need to police and abuse our people in the way that we do with our current carceral system. But I don't see that, vision in y'all's budget. So I would just, ask that we begin moving away from policing and prisons in our community and, pouring into some of the resources that I and other folks have mentioned, because that's truly, what's going to make our community safer and smarter and greater and brighter and better. So I think that's all. Thank you for the time.
Thank you. We're still getting some comments that people are saying that their hands that were raised have been unraised. So if you think that you did raise your hand and you've had it put down, just double check and make sure that your hand is still raised. Okay, next up, we've got Devin Anderson. And after Devin, we'll go back to Eric for some more written questions and comments. So Devin, I'm going to unmute you and the floor is yours. Devin, make sure you unmute yourself.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, thank you. I just want to, again, echo what everybody else on the call has said. It's pretty shameful that the police continue to receive 44% of the budget. I think we all know, I've had multiple conversations with Nick Kovac and Mayor Johnson, highlighting it's unsustainable. We've known this for years. And the fact that you all continue to fund the police at 44% of the budget, which is not the full cost of police. You all highlighted the pension costs they have. We wrote a report last year highlighting the need to defund the police so we can actually keep services alive around. It's deplorable. And I think now obviously is another moment we have the opportunity to move away from police and policing and invest in things like participatory budgeting. So residents who have robust visions of what Milwaukee can look like, obviously more robust than are articulated in the yearly budget, to have a say on how these funds are spent, because it's not enough for y'all just to continue business as usual as we face real dire budgetary situations. And that's it.
Thank you, Devin. Okay, and with that, we'll go back to Eric for a couple of written questions and comments. Eric, take it away.
Okay, there was somebody who just commented. They just wanted to say that they did want to advocate for money going to public works, especially sanitation and roads, also for public safety. Then we did have some questions about how much funding is going towards mental health, and related to that, if there's any funds allocated towards early childhood education.
Yeah, there is an early childhood education, it's a small special fund, and there's also quite a bit of work that the Milwaukee Health Department does. A lot of that work, a lot of it's on lead and sexually transmitted diseases and child and maternal health. Some of it is on mental health, but there's also a number of partners the Milwaukee Health Department works with. A lot of those are county resources and also private resources that the health department attempts to connect residents with.
And just to add on to what Director Kovac said, different units of government have different responsibilities. And so you'd see more of that, those sort of investments coming from Milwaukee County, which has responsibility for health and human services in our jurisdiction. So if you follow along, I think right now the county executive is presenting opportunities for folks to be engaged with the similar process, the departmental requested budget before he presents his proposed budget as well. So that's where you might find more governmental investment in mental health, especially because that's the jurisdiction mostly of Milwaukee County.
Okay, and the next question is also about police. It's the question about what are the key performance indicators or metrics that are used to evaluate police performance, and are they weighted in any way?
Well, the key measure is obviously crime, and there's many different categories of crime. I don't know that we have a formal weighting system, but obviously there's certain crimes that most people want to hear about first. Homicide first and foremost, but also non-fatal shootings, shots fired, all kinds of violent crime. It's probably the one that we review most. But non-violent crime and other kinds of nuisance crime, we review their response times to different categories to their crimes. We review their compliance with the Collins settlement. We review their management of overtime. There's a number of different priorities the police have, crime reduction being the main one. But we have a variety of different metrics we're using, and we'll certainly take suggestions from the public on new metrics we could begin to use.
Okay, the next question is also about fire and police. It's a question about, is there data available on the number of fire and police members who are not residents of the city of Milwaukee?
There is. We periodically update the Common Council with that. I don't know if I know the most recent numbers off the top of my head, but I think it's about half are not. But that's give or take. I know the numbers, are moving. So we can certainly get those to you, and we can post them on milwaukee.gov/budget. And if you send an email, we can send out the most recent information. We do track that.
Okay, and then there is just a general question about strategy in terms of, we've been talking a lot about trying to get a sales tax to help increase revenue. And the question is, outside of the sales tax, are there any other items being used in strategy for the city?
Yeah, so we certainly are seeking a sales tax. Some folks on this call may or may not be aware that Milwaukee is one of the only large cities in the United States that doesn't have a tool for local revenue generation outside of the property tax. So we're heavily reliant on the property tax, which I had mentioned in my presentation, is also capped by state law. And then state shared revenue, which obviously has been cut, diminished, and kept flat over the course of the past couple of decades here as well. So we're certainly seeking to have a local sales tax option that we'll be able to use in order to make sure that we continue funding core city services. But I'd like to see more than just a sales tax. As I mentioned, prior, the shared revenue program that we have in place used to cover the entirety of the cost for the police department, the entirety of the cost for the fire department, and had tens of millions of dollars left over for us to make investments in other core city services, other departments, other priorities, many of which callers or folks on this meeting have suggested. So I'd like to see a mix. I'd like to see more than just one tool. Certainly the sales tax, an increase there, allowing us as a local government to be able to capture those dollars would be great. And I want to see that, but I'd like to see some additional revenue generation tools as well. On the sales tax, just a quick anecdote. If you look at data from the Wisconsin Department of Tourism, and tourism is a big part of the economy in the state of Wisconsin, you'll see that a sizable number, 20% or so, more than that, I believe, is generated here in Milwaukee. People come to Milwaukee. It's the front door to our state. It's the population center. It's the diversity center. It's the cultural center of our state. And when people come to Milwaukee, whether they're commuting in for work every single day from our inner ring suburbs, whether they're coming up from Chicago to see the Bulls play the Bucks at Fiserv Forum, or whether they're coming to our city to have business meetings or for vacation, we should be able to capitalize on that, because when they come here and they land or they hop off a train or they drive, they're using our infrastructure that's paid for by City of Milwaukee taxpayers. If they get into a medical emergency and they end up calling the fire department, it's our fire department paid for by City of Milwaukee taxpayers. If they have an issue where they have to call the police, then obviously they're engaging with the Milwaukee Police Department, paid for by City of Milwaukee taxpayers. So folks are using our infrastructure, they're using our services, but nobody's paying in. I kind of equate it to a tip at a restaurant, right? When you go to a restaurant and you receive quality service, you leave a tip. And the City of Milwaukee, unfortunately, just is not getting its tip. And that's what we're trying to stress to our partners of the state, is that we're providing services and we just want to be compensated for it so that we can continue to make the investments and continue providing those services, not just to our residents, but to all of our visitors, whether they're daily commuters or whether they're folks who are participating in our tourism industry here in the City of Milwaukee and the state of Wisconsin.
Okay, I'll go through a couple more and then turn it back to Bill for questions from the attendees. First one is a comment and then a question. The comment is about the low amount of money that goes to DPW, the Department of Public Works, street sanitation, forestry. So please consider providing more funding for that, as that has an important impact on the community, especially the underserved. And then the question relates to the salary increases. General city employees don't have the same collective bargaining power as police and fire. So is there any consideration being given to any increases for general city employees?
Yeah, I touched on, and I believe Director Kovac touched on as well, the fact that, yes, members of the police and fire departments, they're by way of their unions, have the ability to collectively bargain for wages and benefits. That is state law, whereas other general city employees do not have the ability to do that. But after 10 years of belt tightening, trying to squeeze in order to balance our budgets, we're in a position, again, where we're hemorrhaging employees, and it's become problematic for us to continue on with that same sort of strategy. It's not allowing us to retain our employees who, again, get the excellent grade A, the elite training from the City of Milwaukee, and then take that investment that we have made and our taxpayers have made in them as employees, and take those skills over to other units of government. We don't want that. That doesn't help us to deliver quality services to the citizens of this city. I certainly don't want to see the folks that we make an investment in to leave. I want to retain those employees so they continue working, having a career in the city and providing services for some time. And so we're in a position, and not just a position, but it's certainly a priority of mine, to make sure that we examine that, because we can't afford to do it because of the fiscal situation that the city is in, but we also can't not do it. We can't afford to keep on going the path that we've been going down over the course of the past number of years in this city as well, because that's going to just continue to exacerbate the problem where we see those city employees we're making investments in leave to other jurisdictions for more money. So that's something that is keenly aware to me, as mayor, keenly aware to Director Kovac, budget analysts, and we certainly will be examining that by the time I present my proposed executive budget next month.
All right, and the last question I'll go through before turning it over to Bill is about how much money in the budget is going towards services for youth, and if there's any funding for the new youth correctional facility, and if so, why?
We do, via our community development block grants program, we do fund a number of youth serving organizations. I don't know if that's reflected in the departmental requested budget, which is what we're discussing here tonight, not my proposed executive budget. But we do, as a city, make investments in youth serving organizations across the city of Milwaukee. The 2023 requested budget, the budget request that we've gotten thus far from City of Milwaukee departments has zero allocation towards the youth prison proposal here in Milwaukee. And as a matter of fact, future budgets won't reflect that either, because that's not a facility that'd be run by the City of Milwaukee. That'd be a Department of Corrections at the state of Wisconsin run and administered facility, not a City of Milwaukee facility, even though it would be housed here in the City of Milwaukee. And housed here in the City of Milwaukee for, I think, a critical reason that folks on this call and others, I would imagine, would agree with. Young people from Milwaukee, when they're justice involved, they're shipped 3.5, 4 hours north of here in basically the middle of nowhere in northern Wisconsin for their term, for their sentence. That takes them away from family, it takes them away from friends, it takes them away from services that could help them to better become rehabilitated to re-enter into our society. And so as a value proposition, we were approached and had conversations about what is best for those young people and overall what's best for our community. Is it best to continue sending them 4 hours north away from the people that they care about, the people who care about them, and the resources that would help them to better reintegrate into society? Or is it better for those young people to serve out their sentences closer to home and have those resources available to them? I think the answer is that we want to have them closer to home here in the city and have the people who care about them and the organizations that can wrap services around them to be here, to have better access to them so that they're in a better position, so that when they re-enter into society, they're productive, contributing members, and society overall is in a better place. We can't accomplish that at Lincoln Hills. That's proven. We've not been able to do that. I think now we're in a better position. We will be in a better position with a state-run facility, not a city-run facility, but a state-run facility in the city of Milwaukee when that facility is here, closer where kids live.
Okay, let's take one more verbal speaker. So next up, we've got Mark Pelzek. Mark, I'm going to unmute you now and go ahead and unmute yourself and take it away.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
Mark Pelzek, I am a resident of the 13th Automatic District. Good evening, Mayor Johnson, Alderman Spiker, and Director Kovac. Thank you for the opportunity to speak about the priorities of the budget. Budgets are moral documents and should be reflective of the priorities of the community. The requested budget that was presented continues unsustainable spending on the police department of over $300 million. This spending means less budget dollars for every other city department and will undoubtedly lead to the bankruptcy of our city government. I urge you to cut spending in the police department and to reinvest those funds into services provided by all other city departments. City departments like DPW, DNS, MHD, the library, and DCD all provide the services that our community needs and quite frankly demand. These departments have been cut year after year, making it difficult to provide the quality services that our city deserves. The general city employees in these departments have been doing more with less and often for less pay for far too long. Many of these employees saw this year their first raise in 10 plus years. I ask you to invest in these departments and the general city employees by not cutting jobs or services, not laying off general city employees, fully funding city services, and providing regular raises for those employees. All employees deserve raises, not just those in police and fire, and not just one raise every 10 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next up, we've got Jordan Terry. Jordan, I'm unmuting you now. So go ahead and unmute yourself and go ahead and speak.
Hi, I'm Jordan Terry. I'm the digital organizer with the African American Roundtable. And the issue that I really wanted to touch on is the fact that there are 4 missing common council members, and that leaves like around 100,000 to 140,000 Milwaukee residents unrepresented. And to me, this looks like a hot mess, and it looks like a local government that's failing. I really feel that the common council and the mayor needs to put participatory budgeting into practice, since like our local representatives are clearly like failing at their jobs. There does not need to be any more like funding into the police, and I kind of just don't really care if the pigs lose their jobs. So that's all I got to say.
Okay, thank you. And so at this point, we could go back and take a couple more written questions while the queue builds up for the speakers. So Eric, if you're ready, we can kick it back over to you.
Okay, I'll go through some of these. I think there's some comments in here as well as some questions. There was I think a comment about putting more money into mental health, public health, library, rather than in police. And if at any point, if the mayor, the budget director, or Alderman Spiker, if you guys want to say anything, just please interject. I'll just be going through and reading some of the comments. They're not questions as much as they're comments. Although this one you might have a response to. This is a question about, again, can we put more money into the health of the community, particularly for lead poisoning prevention?
There is an existing program in the Milwaukee Health Department that over the decades was very successful with home intervention with children who test positive. Obviously, there was some serious issues with that program that were very well publicized a few years ago, and that ship is being righted by Commissioner Johnson. And there was also an additional investment in the first tranche of ARPA money, significant additional investment, I think to the tune of $26 million to increase that program so that we intervene in even more children's lives. We basically lowered the level where that would trigger a massive home intervention to an even lower level of blood poisoning. And we're increasing the program with that money in order to achieve that result.
Okay, and the next question is kind of similar to that. It's about more a comment about trying to prioritize preventative efforts rather than reacting through funding police, but there's also a mention of the mortality rate and infant mortality rate and what's going on with public health in the community. And there's another comment just saying that all city services are important to make the city a safer, better place. Can't really afford to cut those more. There's a question about how much the sales tax would impact the poor residents of the community. And there's a question about what are your thoughts on establishing a participatory budgeting process for Milwaukee?
Well, this is budget education week, and we're getting a lot of public feedback at this meeting. There's other meetings we outlined. We definitely want to increase the public's ability to participate in the budgeting process, and we're hoping to have an even more robust way to do that as we prepare for next year's budget. We'll begin even earlier, we hope, with the public outreach. So we're definitely open to suggestions from the public, not just about the budget itself, but about how we can do better outreach. We've definitely gotten some feedback tonight about people felt like there should have been better notice of this meeting. So we'll work together with our public outreach team and our communications professionals to get the word out better. And we'll work. There's other kinds of interactive ways. Somebody else mentioned cell phone apps and things, and I know the county's got a program, and we had a program earlier where you could try to sort of do the budget yourself through an app. And we're going to try to engage the public in as many ways as we can going forward.
Okay, and I'll go through one more question and then turn it back to Bill. Just very quickly, this question is, what can be done to curtail how much departments are spending and get the city to be more frugal?
I think the mayor's belt tightening slide showed that we've already been doing that, and we had to do it. We're doing it even more now. When you see that budget gap, that 151 that has to turn into zero by next month, there'll be a lot of frugality and a lot of service reduction as a part of that.
Okay, and I think Bill said there's some more people who want to speak. And just a reminder, if you do want to speak, make sure you use that raise your hand icon. I'll turn it over to you, Bill.
Thanks, Eric. So first up, we're going to have Nader Carlson, followed by Raisha Farmer. So Nader, I'm going to unmute you, and go ahead and unmute yourself, and go ahead.
Thanks. It's pronounced Nadir. And I have a question specifically for the mayor, because I think one of the things that's not being talked enough about is the state relationship and how much we're forced by the state to fund things the way we fund them, right? We say we want less money to go to the police, but it essentially has to go there. And I know you've been working on building relationships with the state. It probably won't happen for this cycle, but where do you see that for maybe the next budget cycle where the state maybe takes on some of the increased cost?
Well, I'm hoping that in the next legislative session, after the elections that are currently underway, that will conclude in November, that we'll be able to get some movement from state government to assist, again, not just the city of Milwaukee, but local governments, including Milwaukee County, which is in a very similar dire financial position. But not even just the largest city, Milwaukee, the largest county, Milwaukee, but jurisdictions throughout the entire state. I'm hoping that in the next legislative session, we're able to move forward with legislation that would allow some additional flexibility at the local level to be able to solve our own problems. To a degree, in terms of a sales tax, I mean, we're not asking the state for additional revenue. We're just simply asking for the ability to solve our own problems using local solutions. And then in terms of shared revenue, look, we're asking for the state to honor the promise that it made to local governments more than a century ago. where it said that it would collect these sales and income taxes and fairly distribute them back to communities. And for decades and decades, that system worked. It was indexed to inflation. We got enough money back. But again, going back nearly the past 20 years or so, that commitment, that promise to local governments just hasn't kept up. And as a result, we've seen property taxes increase, even though it's capped at a certain level by state government as well. So really our hands are tied and we're working diligently every single day. And I have been since I've been in this office to rebuild those relationships with the state of Wisconsin so that we can continue to have the resources necessary to provide the core services that constituents in Milwaukee, visitors to Milwaukee, commuters to Milwaukee, all expect and deserve. That's what I want to deliver. That's what I'm working with state legislators to bring across the finish line. And my hope is that in the next legislative session, they see and they really understand that the situation is so dire and we need the assistance now.
Okay, next up will be Raisha Farmer, followed by Charlene Moore. So Raisha, I'm going to unmute you now and unmute yourself, and the floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks. Raisha, I'm a resident of the 9th Aldermanic District, which currently has no representation from the city of Milwaukee, which sucks because I know that my neighbors already feel disconnected from this process, and that folks have said on this call, the means for offering comment are slim, inaccessible. The means for having a relationship with our representatives when we do have them are slim and inaccessible. So I'm excited about the hearing on October 3rd, which will be in person, and I hope that the city has a plan in place to reach out to my neighbors in the 9th Aldermanic District via mail or flyering or something unconventional in some way that they haven't before. But I wanted to name that I'm here in support of the African American Roundtable's demand for participatory budgeting, because like someone earlier on the call said, it's clear that the process for budgeting is failing us and is not inclusive of what we want to see. I think we've heard numerous demands for less money going to police and more going to housing, to youth programming. Hell, to be honest, like I was looking for just a coffee place in my local community to meet with someone over the next week, and there's only one, and you'd be surprised how just something like an eatery or a coffee shop or just a place to be and fellowship with folks can make a huge difference in terms of community safety. So I do want to call for participatory budgeting so that me and my neighbors can vote for those things that we want to see in our community and have the pot of money to be able to execute those things, because it's clear to me that if we keep the decision making in the city's hands, we won't see what we need and what we want. And so, yeah, my calls for participatory budgeting and all the other things that we've heard on today's call. My question, though, is what is Mayor Johnson and the city's budget department going to do to commit to lessening this Milwaukee Police Department's budget and to increase funding into youth programming, housing, mental health, more things to do in local communities, maybe more to the neighborhoods and Department of Public Works budget. And since we've named those things, what is the commitment to that? And what's the plan to move forward on that commitment? Thanks.
We're assembling all this feedback. We're hearing it, and we'll, the mayor will be releasing his budget in a month.
So next up, we've got Charlene Moore, followed by Alan Chavoya. So Charlene, unmuting you now, and take it away.
Good evening. Am I coming in okay as far as sound?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you all so much. Charlene Moore, I am a resident of the 4th District, Alderman Bauman's district, and I'm also sort of a lifelong support of young people throughout the city and beyond. And I just have to echo, what a lot of callers have been sharing in regards to participatory budgeting, really figuring out a better way to get our community involved. I just recently started organizing residents in my neighborhood to just deal with the crime and the safety and just, getting more connected and figuring out how to get city services. And it just seems like it's a never ending sort of wheel, because if we're going to continue this process of always funding, putting more and more funding into policing versus, very, services that our community needs, this city unfortunately is not going to be successful. I do want to echo the sentiments of making sure that there are opportunities and resources for young people in the city. They get blamed for a lot of issues that are happening. And a lot of times the data shows that it's not young people that are the target or that are the issue. It's other extenuating issues and circumstances, but yet they get the blame for everything. And so if that's the case, why don't we see more opportunities for them? Summer opportunities and year-round opportunities. I just don't see opportunities for young people. Also, in regards to the City Youth Council, I would love to.
Seconds.
Thank you. I would love to see that coming back. I'm not sure what happened to it, but I would absolutely highly encourage the mayor to make sure that young people stay and continue to stay a priority in the city. And that's going to be based on what resources that we put into them. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next, we've got Alan Chavoya, followed by Femi Akamoledon. So, Alan, I'm unmuting you now, and the floor is yours.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good evening. My name is Alan Chavoya. I'm born and raised in this city, and I also organize with the Milwaukee Alliance Against Racism and Political Repression. I'm deeply, deeply disturbed with the way the city's budget has been and continues to be mismanaged. We're heading towards insolvency, and you all know this. You stated this, right? But instead, you're passing the buck to the state, saying that the shared revenue isn't high enough. I'm sorry, but that just tells me that you're not willing to show leadership in our city. And you are instead willing to succumb to the police department and their so-called union. They're driving us to financial ruin, and we, the working people, will have to pay for them to continue to harass our communities. In other words, you are allowing the police to hold the residents of Milwaukee hostage. We at the Milwaukee Alliance demand that we take half of the police budget, half of their operating budget, to fund mental health services, non-law enforcement public jobs, education, and to fix our roads and antiquated electrical grid. You've also stated that you're aware of the many public sector employees who are leaving to take better jobs, to take better wages at different jobs. Well, you can provide better wages for them if you divert the funds from the police. Further policing, as has already been stated, right, by so many people on this call, will not drive down crime. Access to good public schools and libraries, healthcare, public sector union jobs, home ownership, and healthy recreational opportunities can drive and have driven crime rates down. Mayor Johnson, stop succumbing to the police. We must save our city and stop funding the cops. Fund the people, not the police. Thank you.
Thank you. So next up, we've got Femi Akamoledon, and then we'll go back over to Eric for some more written questions and comments. So Femi, I'm unmuting you now. Go ahead and unmute yourself and take it away.
Well, thank you for your time. As the last speaker said, it has been a little overwhelming and sad to hear of testimony, public testimony going on. Kovac said the mayor will have to make a tough decision regarding this budget. And the reality is that that tough decision is going to have an impact on our community. I'm originally from Kansas City, Missouri, moved here in 2019. And in my years being here, I've sat in the same exact meeting that the community has constantly called year after year for a participatory budget system, and it's never been addressed. And the mayor and all of you continue to talk about we need local control in which if you're not gonna hear our cries that we need a participatory budget system, like those things, those cries are both equal and they're real concerns, but the community continues to not be heard year after year. A city that is majority young people, statistics shows that, and recreation is not met, their needs are not met. Like this city is sadly the way that it is due to not being heard. And so like, at the end of the day, like everyone is saying pretty much the same things. Your community is saying the same thing. It's saying to shrink the police budget, address the budget that way for the time being, because obviously that is a big issue. And we know that the local control for Milwaukee of a shared revenue system is an issue. That's real. It's a real issue, but also the over bloated budget of the police is a real issue. And if you want to be heard as this board with need for local control of a budget in Milwaukee, then you also have to hear the cries of the community for a participatory budget system as well. Those cries are both equal, that concern is equal. And it's very sad that young people and families and poor communities, which is our state right now, is the result of that. And so the clear fact is, like, we are in a dire situation. These are hard times for the city. And data shows that in many different directions. But this is also a city of creativity, of beautiful people who desire to see their city the way that they want to see it. And it's up to you all to do that. The mayor has a real hard decision to make, but we're saying it's an easy decision. Allow the community to be involved in that process. If you want local control, you also have to have a participatory budget system as well. Like those two are the same. And so
10 seconds.
At the end of the day, do what needs to be done. Do what needs to be done. And that is shrink the budget of police at this point in time. Thank you.
Thank you. And at this point, we'll check in with Eric to see if there are any more questions or comments that have come in. And then after that, if there's any closing remarks, perhaps we can go back to the mayor or any of our speakers here today. But Eric, do you have anything that was that has come in?
Well, I think there's several comments that are related to what the speaker just stated. They're asking a lot about how come we're funding the police so much? Can we put other resources into other areas of the budget? Now, I would just say, if I know the budget director's contact information is on the screen, but if you do have like specific detailed questions or more technical questions on the budget, you can always send an email or contact not only the budget director, but there's a general email for the budget office. It's budget@milwaukee.gov. So that's budget@milwaukee.gov. You could always send a more technical question there. Just seeing if there's any specific question outside of things we've already covered. I think there was some sentiment expressed about having in-person meetings. And I don't know what the plans are for that going forward for the other budget hearings. But that might be something that one of the panelists wants to talk about. Other than that, I think it's been a lot of the same, like I said, a lot of the same questions about funding the police. Should we wanting to shift funding to other areas of the budget?
And we do have one more speaker who has just raised their hand. Actually, two more. So we could go to Cortez Brown, followed by Joseph Kaltenberg. Cortez, I'm unmuting you now, and go ahead and unmute yourself. Take it away.
All right. Greetings, Mayor. Pleasure to talk to you, man. Hopefully, I can meet you one day. Everybody else, pleasure to meet y'all. I'm going to try to just make this brief because, I don't want to feel like I'm preaching to a choir because the things I can't talk about, everybody can practically agree to it, you feel me, which is the police budget And I'm talking on behalf of the African American Roundtable, and I'm talking on behalf of myself because, you know, I'm a member of the community. I was born in 1998. You feel me? So I really grew up in the community, and now I'm working in the community. I'm a teacher. I'm a basketball coach. You feel me? And it's like I'm really with the people who we trying to help, but it seems like the help never come. You feel me? And like I've been seeing on y'all facial expressions. You feel me? Like I went to college and I learned psychology, so I'm just watching facial expressions. Like y'all really don't care about what we saying. And I heard Alexandria speaking on this earlier, and I'm glad she did. But it's like I'm preaching to a choir. You feel me? So before I get off this call, Mayor Cavalier, listen. I work at Franklin Square Playground. You feel me? It's a summer rec program with the Milwaukee Public Schools. Our last day is Friday, but tomorrow I'm putting on a hoop session. I would love to meet you. If you want to pop out at 5 o'clock. You feel me? You can bring out a whole team. I would love to have my team play your team, and we can actually talk about stuff in real life, because I know that y'all just going to blow me off over the camera. You feel me? So listen, that invite is there. I did this last year, and I was a teacher at Howard Fuller Collegiate Academy, and Mayor Barrett, he popped out, and I had to just show him, like, you know, I'm not no goofy or nothing. Like, I'm young still, so I'm still learning. And that's why I've been listening to everybody. And it took me a minute to even raise my hand, because I don't want to feel like I'm being blown off. You feel me? So that invite is open tomorrow, 5 o'clock. It's right outside of North Division High School. They actually just lost their principal. So, like, my students, they going through it right now. You feel me? They just lost the head of their school. This is a person that, you know, who's supposed to help them build their future, and he just passed. So, like, you know, man, it's a lot of work that we need to do in this community, y'all. And I'm really one of them ones. Like, I grew up in this stuff. You feel me? So I know what I'm talking about.
15 seconds.
What I'm doing. You feel me? So shout out to the African American Roundtable. Like, we doing our thing. You feel me? So, man, I just hope, you know, y'all listen. That's it.
Thank you. Next up, we've got Joseph Kaltenberg, and then we've got one more speaker after Joseph. So Joseph, you're unmuted. Go ahead and unmute yourself and take it away.
Thank you so much for your time. In the interest of transparency, I'd just like to say I am a city employee, and I know several of you, and I just want to say thank you for this opportunity. I'm speaking right now as a resident of Milwaukee that's concerned about, though, the trend of reducing city staff in favor of private contracts. I don't know. I think I had seen somewhere that we're at 1,000 full-time equivalent positions lower than we're at a certain point. I apologize if I got that wrong, but I thought I saw that on the slide. In my opinion, in a lot of cases, the private contracting is more expensive, even when factoring to this elusive, like, future pension obligations that seems like the eternal barrier to creating positions within the city to do work that is currently contracted. It also sends the majority of that money to outside of Milwaukee, despite the fact that we have SPE and RPP requirements. I guarantee you that is not equivalent, as if that money was paid to a city employee. It creates an administrative imbalance, I think, because the majority of the positions that are cut are the lower paying laborer positions and direct service positions. That administrative imbalance is likely creating issues of equity, because I would assume that in city government, like most places, the higher levels are disproportionately white and male. And so I guess my question is, do we on a regular basis conduct analysis of costs, internal costs compared to private contracting costs? And if so, when was the last time those were done? I know since COVID, the wage increases are likely, the private market are likely outpacing I know they're outpacing wage increases for city employees. So I was just curious how that is viewed.
There has been a public discussion at the Finance Committee recently about these relative costs of private contractors versus public workers, and that's part of what led to some of our reclassification and a lot of the building trades and direct service work. I'm not sure if I was muted or not, but anyway, we are looking at something we've looked at, especially in your department, Joe, in the Department of Public Works. And as part of this year's budget, we're taking a close eye at their rental budget and taking a close eye at their at that line item to make sure that doesn't go over, and looking at ways we can bulk up the city workforce in order to, we're trying to get as much of the work done by city workforce as possible. And part of that is the classification studies and making sure we're able to recruit at competitive wages.
Okay, and our final speaker is a Michelle Bryant. Michelle, I'm going to unmute you now, and we'll let Michelle speak, and then we'll go back to Eric for any more written questions or comments. So Michelle, you are unmuted. You can go ahead and speak.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
This is actually Senator Taylor, so maybe that's why it was being ignored since Michelle had spoke before. I want to say, as a former chair of the state's Joint Committee on Finance, where we, of course, have a budget significantly larger than the city of Milwaukee, we allowed residents more than 90 seconds to speak, but more importantly, not doing something by Zoom. This is challenging for me. It does not reflect allowing your community to participate in your budget process. There's no reason that we should not be able to be in person. For local electeds, for my district alone, not being a part of the process means a very significant portion of the city of Milwaukee is not able to weigh in and vote on these matters. And especially a large portion of those being individuals that happen to be African American and some of the largest voting blocks for Black people in the city of Milwaukee. I'm concerned about a budget that lacks economic development, quality amount of mental health services in order for us to create a healthier community that has less crime. The lack of business development and home ownership as a priority means that we are not planning for our future. The ARPA dollars being used to fill the budget and not being put and used in a way to make money for us, because they're not coming back. It's a one-hit wonder. What are we doing to chase the settlements that the city has? I don't remember seeing, and I asked in the questions, and the questions were definitely being filtered about the settlements. And where are those in this budget process? And what are we doing to go and say, well, if we got a lot of settlements that are dealing with city employees that were challenged by this way or that way, what are we doing to go upstream and stop that? What are we doing to address the settlements with police? Because what I see is the training that's happening after settlements isn't changing behavior. And as a result, it means that we're going to continue to have settlements, which is feeding into the word that nobody wants to say, which is we're headed to bankruptcy if we're not already there. And without having that honest conversation, I think that we don't prepare our residents for what happened to Detroit happening to Milwaukee, with a group of legislators that have truly helped to get us there by some of the things that have been said, Mayor, by yourself and others about what state government has done. I'll end with, I do believe that we can do a better job of using apprenticeships and pre-apprenticeships to create pathways for employment in city jobs, as well as to prepare our residents beyond the type of work that's in this community to bring new industry in this community. Pathways to work is necessary, and it's the only way that we're going to address
15 seconds.
Some of the crime issues that are here. I'll end with participatory budgeting sounds great, but if it means that people are asking for equal amounts in each of the districts, I do not agree, because equality and equity are different. Some communities in some areas have greater needs because they have been raped of dollars and support for a long, long, long time in this city. So I hope that equity and need based on the needs in the community are the priority versus just trying to do some equal numbers. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll take it back over to Eric to see if there were any other questions that had come through. Eric, go ahead.
All right, and this one is not so much a question, but I'll read through it. It's from a city employee that care deeply about their job. It takes a lot of hours to train staff to do the technical work. That takes a lot of time and money. Part of the concern here is that it's difficult to retain these employees who are dedicated to the community, who do a lot of volunteer work. So the question is about the difficulty of trying to serve the public efficiently when we're continually lose staff, what we can do to better retain staff. There's also a question about does the mayor plan to hold an internal budget discussion similar to this, just with the City of Milwaukee employees? And then there were some questions about, I think the senator just referred to about, is the city facing bankruptcy? And what are we doing about schools and lead infrastructure? I think part of that is the concern about lead in the water. There was one participant who would prefer to see property taxes capped and replaced with sales tax. And then just in general, some questions or comments regarding participatory budgeting. But again, I just want to say, there's some, if anybody has more technical questions or specific questions about details in the budget, I think the budget director will be available on phone or email, and we'll be able to answer any questions you might have.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. And we are having another meeting tomorrow with budget director and our staff, Eric, and our team of analysts. Ask Me Anything tomorrow. So we'll have that as an opportunity as we're getting close on time today. And there were some questions about the lead program. We definitely follow the data there, and the commissioner very closely follows the data and makes sure that we make our investments where they can actually save children. So I'll say that in response to how we're approaching the lead crisis. And then perhaps the mayor has some concluding remarks.
Great. Thank you, Director Kovac. Thank you, Alderman Spiker. And really, thank you to all the budget analysts, the interpreters, and all the citizens who engaged with our process here tonight. Again, we had hundreds of people that registered to be a part of this, and it was a pretty significant number. I'm glad that so many folks were interested and engaged with us on the departmental requested budget for 2023. As we said a number of times throughout the evening, we're working very diligently. The budget office, myself, we're meeting regularly in preparation for presenting the proposed executive budget, my proposed executive budget, over the course of the next month to the Common Council, which will then lead to an opportunity for the council to deliberate. There'll be another opportunity for the community to weigh in a joint public hearing with myself, as well as all other citywide elected officials and members of the Milwaukee Common Council in addition before budget amendments and then budget adoption later in November. Again, this is for the public's sake a true beginning to really be involved, to be engaged in the budget. We really appreciate the fact that so many people, hundreds of you out there in the city, engaged with us in this process tonight. So again, I want to thank the budget director, thank the budget analysts, thank everybody on our tech team over at the City Channel, and again, thank all of you, the citizens of Milwaukee that engaged with us tonight.